Welcome, welcome back to the Delineation. I don't remember what episode this is because this is my fourth podcast recording in the past 24 hours, so I'm a little all over the place. But today we have a very special guest named S.J. Anderson. Welcome to the show, S.J. It's very nice to meet you. Not
Great
meet
to
you,
be
but
here.
have you.
Yeah, no, great to be here, man. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor and a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. So I can't remember how I probably met SJ off Twitter at some point, and back when he didn't have a huge following that he does now on Twitter. And I remember seeing your tweets and being like, because you were just a small account, but you were like actually tweeting about like really like doing really good astrology and keeping it very professionally minded. So I've been following you for a minute, and then you've been doing YouTube now for a while. You're rocking it, you're killing it. All of my people on like my Patreon like all love your videos. They really like how you started just really focusing on like specific transits and going into it. So I've become a big fan of your work. So it's really, and me and you have a podcast that we do with Dan over at Cosmic Keys. It's over on his Rockfin, I believe, called Pluto Pilled. So we've definitely chatted before about everything that's going on, but this is the first time I've had you on my podcast.
Absolutely. And it's great to be here. Yeah, I think I came across you, Jed, just through the Twitter sphere. I mean, those days in like 2016, 2017, 2018 were kind of the young, like the Twitter, Astro Twitter, and that whole social media community, I think was just burgeoning at that time. And then to see it grow, and then your kind of supernova, Twitter kind of huge account, and then you sort of all of that happened. But the one thing I like about your work is the consistent YouTube. That's I think business wise is smart, and just audience wise. I mean, people want video. It's great to connect every week with someone or on a regular basis, and you're really rocking it. I love the weatherman style stuff too. That's really cutting edge technology. It's a really nice way to do it every week. So
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, what's and I've been because I try to bully astrologers into getting into YouTube because it's I see so many amazing threads on Twitter just get swept into the algorithm because Twitter doesn't like threads. And I think social media, like 280 character format, media is not going to last forever. Short form video content's not going to last forever, but like long form video content where there's dialogue, there's conversation, the information could be put there, I think is always going to stick around at some point. And I think a lot of astrologers could not only like, I mean, there's a lot. What's funny about YouTube too is there's so many astrologers, and there are a lot of good ones, but there's also a lot of like, I don't want to say not good astrologers, but for what they do, it's very, kiddie pool kind of stuff. And there's not a lot of astrologers out there really diving into the deep stuff, which is something I really appreciate about your work because it is so niche and it's not easy to like be consistent with it and keep having video ideas. And but it is so rewarding too, because when you put that information out there and you're able to build the audience, like it really does change things. So, yeah, YouTube has been great. It's awesome seeing you on there too, because so many people are not taking advantage of what YouTube has to offer. It's a platform with, I don't want to say no one on it, but not a lot of people really doing like creative astrology work, which is something I love about your videos is your introduction, the like oh, that's another thing I have to say. It took me a minute to notice, but you put the volume under your dialogue so perfectly. Whatever, it's like classical music, and it's so low that like I don't hear it, but then but I totally hear it at the same time. I absolutely love it. So it's completely. I feel very engaged. Like YouTube's you want engagement, and I feel very engaged when I watch your content, which is like really inspiring for me to figure out how do I engage my audience that way.
thanks. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I mean, I've had all different kinds of editing strategies on YouTube, and I've gone through different iterations. But I forgot exactly a few months, 3, 4, maybe even 6 months ago, I decided to kind of turn that background music down. So it's there, but it just doesn't get in the way. But I always want it there, because even if someone's not aware that they're listening to it, they are listening to it. And it's like calming new age vibes or something that I found on one of the sites that I was using to get music at some point. So it's part of my vision is I want people to come into that YouTube space and just settle in and feel healed. Really, it's healing. I'm trying to heal people through astrology, heal myself. Maybe that's Chiron stuff, I don't know. But I mean, I really do think the power of astrology is it's a healing spiritual technology. And that's why I do it. And that's why my videos, that's one of the major reasons why I keep going, because I want to offer this to the world in a way. I live it, first of all, as you do too. I mean, we're living this stuff all the time. And so to even get to share it, I feel like is a privilege. But the other thing I just wanted to say about the YouTube, yeah, Well, actually, I'm just going to turn it back to you. I forgot there. I was something else, but just YouTube is awesome. People, the number one search engine, or number two,
It's the number
second to
two.
Google.
Yeah, it's the number two, and it's like it's pretty much impossible to get your stuff on Google like ranking the way it should. But YouTube is literally just a mixture of the thumbnail title and the length essentially. But no, it's well, I like that you did that too. The background music, because I've always wanted to do that with my work, but I never got it like right. So I love that you did that really really well. But
Thanks.
well,
Thanks.
so anyway, I would love for you to, introduce yourself for the people that may have never heard. I've mentioned you a bunch of times, but for the people that don't know you, do you want to do a little introduction?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just, I'm an astrologer, Texan, born in Austin. Spent most of my life in Texas, a year in Portland, a year in New York City. My influences, I came to astrology in my mid 30s. I came to esotericism in terms of like astro symbolism in right at my Saturn return when my Saturn return hit, and that's when I began studying tarot. I studied tarot for a few years, and the astro and planetary symbolism in the tarot deck only goes so far when you stay within the containers of that world. And that body of literature, met Dr. Jen Zart randomly in 2016. Boom. And I got bit by the bug, and I've been basically full-time obsessed ever since.
So
Lucky enough to have it. Yeah.
so Jen's art astrology pilled you.
She astrology pilled me, absolutely. And it was funny because if people know Jen, she's matter of fact. She's like knows her shit. She's a PhD, very smart woman. And I started like, I was doing my tarot shtick, just hanging out with our mutual friends at a music conference. We all rented this massive Airbnb, a 20 room house, and it was through another group of friends. And I start talking tarot, and she just looks at me like, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Oh, by the way, is that okay to drop an F-bomb? Is that,
No,
are we cool
we
with that?
keep it we
Okay.
keep it clean and family friendly on the delineation.
Okay. Okay. But I mean, and I was like, dude, okay, she's exposed me. And there was some energy of that. But what it really was she said the Jupiter cycle is 12 years. And I had no idea. As soon as she said that, I was at that time struggling with some 12-year cycle stuff. And so I was thinking about why 12 years? Why 12 years? That was on my mind in the few weeks before I met her. So when she said that, it's like a bomb went off, and it's like I've tumbled down that rabbit hole, and I'm there. I'm never going back up, man.
Yeah,
I'm like way down here, man. So
me and Jen were talking about this when I dropped her off. I feel like got into astrology, and the pace at which you were able to like learn and perfect and like apply it is insane. Like you've only been into it for so long. Like we probably got into it around a similar time, but like I mean, you're doing some really crazy stuff really, really fast. And that's very rare to see someone like get into the tradition, get into the technique of it, and be able to apply it so precisely. I was just talking about this with Gordon. Like there's people like that are space fans, and there's people that are like space fans and then also good at what they do. And you're like really one of those people that just picked it up so naturally.
well, part of it, I think, is just I believe it was my fate. So just to come back to that, I mean, it was when it happened. I mean, I can show you the charts and everything. I'll just tell you, it was my Saturn return it was my birthday, the weekend I met her. I didn't tell anybody, they didn't know, but, and it was a Mercury Cazimi right on my sun, for my solar return chart, and my Mercury perfection year that I came into when I met her. And
Well,
so
and
when I
you're a
learned,
Libra rising, so Leo rules your
yeah,
11th, right?
Leo was my 11th, and it's in my 7th. And so it was like my strong exalted sun was triggered by a Kazemi right on my birthday. And that was embedded. Like, I mean, it just, plus my lot of spirit is in Gemini. My lot of fortune is with my Mercury. So the lots are heavily mercurial in my chart, which is something Robert Hand teaches as a reason why people might be astrologically orientated. But for me, I had been studying, you see, these symbols, so it was just like it was a perfect mesh of how reality unfolded. And I come from a technical background. I study mathematics. I mean, I can learn things fast. I'm kind of an autodidactic at times, and I just read every book I could find. I'm kind of obsessive. It just was the thing that was right for me, Cam, and it exploded me into this whole new reality. And I'm grateful to even get to play this role. I kind of think about it as a role we're playing, right? Everybody is assigned a role here. I'm grateful that I found mine, and that it just came naturally, and that, that's why I like Chris Brennan. And when I discovered that podcast, like within 2 or 3 months after I got astro pilled, because it's like an academic talking. He's like a
Yeah.
professorial academic. I was like, okay, this is the shit I got to master it. I felt like I had an obligation to master it because of the commitment I had already made to the tarot. And so if I didn't master the astrology fast, I was kind of a fraud, And so then it kicked open a whole new, of course, as an astrology. I mean, we have all these techniques and these branches of astrology, and it's just, and then the one other thing I'll just quickly say on this for people listening, I mean, you've got to make it your own as fast as possible. I tell people this all the time, like,
Yeah.
once you learn what's going on, pay attention to what you're inspired by, because there's like the gods, the astro gods are calling you to like make astrology and to make your unique contribution, and like don't copy people. It's not ignore others, but like if someone's meant to do this, pretty quickly I encourage them to go with their inner inspiration and follow their own gods. And so that was my mentality too, that helped me, because I was pretty quickly like saying, look at these connections, wow, look at all this stuff. And then I started like sharing it, and then the feedback I got, it was pretty clear that like I was getting green lights to start making astrology. And I like that verb, we make astrology. We don't just, it's not passive, it's active.
Yeah, I really like that too. I remember when I first got into astrology, I could only find the very like new age spiritual stuff. And while I liked a lot of it, I was really upset and frustrated that I didn't understand where any of this stuff came from. And getting into the traditional world is kind of like you got to really like dig up. But then I remember when I found the astrology podcast, and it was like, wow, like this is exactly what I was looking for, in terms of like, give it to me in an academic level, in a way that like I can actually understand, what I'm talking about. Like, and when I got Chris's book, he gave it to me when Mercury conjoined Saturn on my ascendant and stationed retrograde. And it was like, I traditional pilled me and completely changed. And then from there, that's really where, too, that's what's the craziest part about astrology. So many people are into the pop part, but when you get into the traditional stuff, like it really unlocks everything that you didn't understand or you didn't get before.
Yeah, for sure. And like so when I got into it, I went to my two libraries in Austin. I was living in Austin, Texas. I got back from Boise, came back to Austin where I've been living. Love Austin, my hometown. Shout out Texans out there. Shout out Austinites. But I went to all the libraries and pulled every book I could find in astrology. And these were libraries that maybe hadn't updated their collections in like a couple of decades. As the internet rose in the late 90s, early aughts, they just stopped ordering titles. But there was still a bunch of books. And I read everything I could get my hands on. I read them all. And after that, and I took notes and everything. And after that, I was like, okay, I still don't quite understand the basic mechanics. Like, and then I heard Chris and saw his course, and I was like, all right, I got to learn, what are the basic mechanics? How do signs and planets and houses interoperate? And so that was the real breakthrough for me, was one, knowing that I needed to answer that question, two, studying the tradition to find the answers that satisfy me. And then now that's the foundation of everything I do, that interrelationship between those three things. But it's hard to get clear answers on that. It's hard to get clear answers on
It
that.
is. I mean, even when you read the books and stuff, then you got to like, have discernment of which astrologers you're listening to and what era they were in and why they might have said something that they did. But that's a good segue into what we're talking about today. Because the reason I wanted to have you on was you recently did a video. You did two videos about the Mars retrograde in Gemini, but you did one about, I don't remember what the title was, but it was pretty much along the lines of a new era. And I thought it was so well done. Like the research that you did for it, you made it look very simple and so easy, which I'm sure it took a long time to really get all of that juicy details out. But listening to it really, something I love about listening to astrologers is I can look at a transit and I can make my own sense of it. But then when you listen to someone else, and they bring in their 2 cents into it, it can really make you go, really like paint a full picture and make you have a better understanding of it. And after listening to what you had to say about those few Mars retrogrades in Gemini and the whole new eras of time that have occurred, at every single one, everything is starting to make sense of this moment. So I guess I'd like to kind of go into if you can just kind of explain that video a little bit more, and what exactly the research that you found and what were you looking for?
Absolutely. So this relates to, I guess I'm going to trace it back to this foundational idea, which is that signs are a division of the ecliptic. We divide the ecliptic into discrete zones. This is a key point, technically. And so we have 30-degree zones. Those are the signs of the zodiac. We have 10-degree zones, the decans. We have zones that are smaller, of varying degrees. Those are the Egyptian terms. But we have degrees. Those are divisions. Those are just like signs, but there's 360 signs in the zodiac as opposed to just 30. And so the theoretical premise here is that when things reoccur in the same degree, there is some kind of symbolic significance to that. That is or the same sign, right? When there's reoccurrence in the same zone, the universe is basically saying, okay, here's a signal that you need to explore connections around these reoccurrences. You see this even in the ancient system. There's astrologers going degree by degree. Even in the Hellenistic system, I forgot there's one that like breaks. I think Firmicus starts breaking down each degree, but doesn't finish it somewhere in his book. Once you get to like early medieval or like mid-medieval or the medieval tradition, there's clearly like degree astrologers. We have the Sabian symbols in the modern context and Kaminsky symbols and all of those that work. And that's a similar idea, right? Each degree is a discrete border that has a whole symbolic opening. And so once the second thing I would say is that retrogrades are special. Retrogrades are special because a planet stays in the same degree for a long time. It's just very simple. My understanding when I want to think about a retrograde is, okay, the universe is telling us, look at that degree, because we're going to stop a planet there, sometimes for weeks. You know, Mars will be in that exact degree, I think, for maybe 2-3 weeks at least. I mean, maybe longer. And so this is the kind of theoretical premise is, okay, now we can go back into the tradition. We could examine that degree using the contemporary symbolic symbol astrology. I didn't do that in this video. I probably should. I'm curious about the Sabian symbols. But the third thing I want to say is that I started this back in 2019 with a particular Saturn retrograde in 2019. This is when my Twitter account blew up the very first time. I was in Prague. I was studying English teaching, and I wake up, Notre Dame's on fire. And I just punch in, when did Saturn, what's going on with it? Saturn was in the degree of its retrograde station. So I punch it up, and the last time it had stationed retrograde in that degree was the Great Fire of London. And so I tweeted that out, and then it got caught up by some astrophysicists, and it triggered a massive debate. And like that was the first time I ever had.
I remember that now.
But that was the same technique. And so this technique is not something I read anywhere, but it's again applying what you learn. You can see that there's different astrologers that are interested in the degree boundaries. There's now cycle research, and solar fire allows me to do all this because I can just punch it up and see all this exactly. And within, yeah,
AstroGold does not do that. And I literally, when I was watching this video, I was like, fuck, like, why can't I have that information or that tool?
AstroSeek may do it. Peter is getting really good. I don't know if I haven't used his tools for this kind of research because I just know how to do it on solar fire. But so that was part of what led to this Mars retrograde video. Was I had good results with the technique in the past, because I knew the Notre Dame fire, when I published my first kind of thing about this, as it blew up and it hit some kind of collective nerve, that's a sign from the universe, in my opinion. It's like, okay, something happened here. The technique worked. I shared some research, boom, it blew up. And so I've been reapplying it every time I see, like, I don't do it as much now. Actually, the other example I'll give you, Mars stationed retrograde in Aries in 2020. The last time it stationed in that degree was the Great Fire of Rome. Where Rome burned. And so we were at a time when there was like the burning of
everywhere. Well, I was in California at that time, and there was the whole West Coast was, I thought it was so symbolic of like Mars literally stations retrograde and the sky's on fire. Like,
yeah, those were beautiful images from that retrograde station of Mars. So literal. And that literal astrology. I mentioned you in a recent video because I was like, we've been talking about this, right? The astrology is so literal right now. And that was one of a good example for how literal it got in 2020. And but even the symbolic nature of it, because Rome burned, I think it was 45 AD. It was one of the times that it ended, like one of the periods, I can look it up here, but I won't, where it was like a symbolic death, where the emperors got like more nasty, or just, and we were going through a collective rebirth, a burning, you might say, of the institutions and the structure of society. And it was for me, it wasn't familiar. Yeah, it wasn't that in isolation, but it was also the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction. And this is something I tell people, it's always layering in, right? I mean, it's like in that Mars retrograde video, I didn't just talk about Mars retrograde at the end. I talked about the other contexts that we're living through now with some of the other cycles that can really help us delineate these layers that are happening. So anyhow, that's the initial technical kind of foundation of why I did that research and where that research came from. And then you just punch it up. Actually, I'll just say quickly another thing. So it's the degree of the retrograde station. When did that happen before? The degree of the direct station, because it's different with Mars based on its declination or its longitude and latitude. It can station. It's not always the same number of degrees of its retrograde cycle. And then the third was, when was the last time Mars has fully had a retrograde in Gemini? Because that's the unique thing about this Mars retrograde. It will take place only in Gemini. We've had others that have where Mars is either stationed direct or retrograde in Gemini, but then been in Cancer or Taurus. And those are still interesting to look at, by the way. I'm not saying this is the only, with some people in the comments were like, this is, you got to look at other stuff. I'm like, yeah, go look at it. It's fine. You can, we have to exclude some things, but so those were the three questions I researched. When did it station last in the same degree? When did it station direct in the same degree? And when was it last fully retrograde in the sign? And then you can now start comparing histories, because that gives you dates. And then now it's time to go into the histories and look for the patterns. And this is the kind of thing where you don't really have to, what you're looking for is stuff that you're not having to make too much of a creative leap. Like, you want to go read those histories and say, okay, that's so obviously connected to the present. It should be obvious like that. If it's good, if it's really working.
Yeah,
I do this a lot.
If it's good astrology, it should be very easy to put together.
Yeah, I do it a lot, and I'm like, okay, this is too much of a stretch. No, I just ignore those and I just won't tweet about them. But when it is really pinging, like a tuning fork, boom, and it starts pinging, you're like, all right, shit, I've just tapped into something. This is fucking crazy. And that's what I was tweeting out about. I was like, this is insane research before I published it. I was like, I can't believe it. And even that video, I was like, what the hell is going on here? This is insane.
No, it was really crazy seeing how you, because it wasn't just like, oh yeah, you found the Mars retrograde and Geminis that have happened before. It was like they were each one of them was a monumental pivot in history for mankind. Yep. Which is not light at all. Like, typically in astrology, you could see those cycles, but like, rare is it where you can go, oh, this is a time when human history changed. This is a time when human history changed. And this is going to be a time when human history changes.
Yes, absolutely. And change, I think, so just to break down one of those examples, the last time Mars stationed direct in the 9th degree of Gemini was 18, I should have this memorized. I think it's 1817, 1818. It was the January 1818, I believe. And the British East India Company, a corporate government, I mean, literally the first corporate government, had won a war. And it was this kind of interim period where it signs a treaty in January 1818 with the main warring party in India. It took another year for it to complete and fully take over, but it was the key turning point in this global corporate government that lasted until the 1850s in India. It was literally, like I said, literally a corporate government. This is not just some kind of ad hominem.
Yeah, well, and when I hear corporate government, I'm like, I wonder how that could play out in the future.
Yeah, and so then you look at that. So exactly, it's like, that's a conversation I've been thinking about and having for a couple of years. When we look at something like the World Economic Forum, which I've been writing about and speaking about in videos for a while, that is a group of corporations. I mean, literally the members of the Fortune 500. And it's a forum for those actors that are not publicly elected officials. I mean, some of them do have a relationship with that entity, but most of the members are private corporate actors. And they're meeting to talk about how they're going to use their money and power to influence and change the world. This is not my idea. I mean, anybody who's following this, just type it in, World Economic Forum, use the keyword The Great Reset, and just read about what commentators of all kinds across all political spectrums and all types of publications have been talking about.
People still think that the Great Reset's like just straight conspiracy theory, when it's literally like, no, the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab literally has a book on this, and it's literally a plan. Like, it's not like, oh, QAnon fucking Trump people. Like, this is legit stuff that the, oligarchs that have all the dark money that run everything are actually implementing, and you don't have a choice. Like, this isn't like fairy tale land. This is all happening behind closed doors.
Exactly right. And that's what I encourage. Like, the keywords before 2020, you could type in something called the fourth industrial revolution, and the writing about it was not conspiratorial at all. It was like science and Wired and people saying, look what's coming. Futurists would just describe what's coming. The thing about technology, though, is that it's not like it just emerges in a vacuum, and then it's allowed to freely develop and then be adopted by governments just randomly or based on like the free spread of ideas. All you have to do is go look at the history of oil, the oil industry and the highway system and how those were interconnected. They destroyed the burgeoning electric vehicle systems, the electric trolley systems, all that was dismantled because of big oil. And this is mainstream. There's a PBS documentary that just talks about the oil industry and the takeover of America's transportation systems.
That was
So
were you doing the video? I meant to actually look this up again before we talked, because I'm pretty sure you did a video about, did you do a video about Eisenhower, not Eisenhower, but FDR? And did you talk about FDR and
yes,
okay, because I think after I watched your video, and I don't remember, you might have actually said this in your video because I watched something else about it, but how FDR, this was all Saturn and Aquarius stuff, like pretty much created what would eventually be the deep state, because his replacement was Eisenhower, who no one really knew, and he was kind of just this guy that really didn't have an influence in politics, had no idea what to do, and that was like who replaced him. So he would be able to let in all of the corporate things that are going on. Eisenhower is the reason why we have the freeway system that we do.
yeah, I think so. It's FDR. Truman is next. And I think you're talking
Truman.
about Truman because he signed the National Security Act in 1947, which was the last time. That's a whole interesting thing because it was the nodes were in. We just went through the same nodal transit as the end of World War II and then the years just after World War II. I think that act was signed the same time. It was North Node and Gemini, the National Security Act that creates the CIA and the national security state. That in the 60s version of it, there was all kinds of dark military operations in Vietnam, something called Operation Phoenix, I think is the name. And that's when they were like training basically terrorism, clandestine terror operations, but
what?
they were using
America trained terrorists?
America had let me Google this right now. It's the idea that you it's the tactic of the warfare style where you have basically Operation Phoenix. Let me just read the exact quote. So I mean the Phoenix program. And here it is. This is just straight first paragraph of Wikipedia. The Phoenix program was designed and initially coordinated by the United States Central Intelligence Agency during the Vietnam War, involving American, Australian, and South Vietnamese militaries. In 1969, the CIA responsibility was phased out, and the program was put under the Civilian Operations and Revolutionary Development Support. So they're not, okay, here it is. The program was designed to identify and destroy the Viet Cong via infiltration, torture, capture, counterterrorism, interrogation, and assassination. So it's basically clandestine terror operations through the intelligence networks. And you can read all about it. It's not like nice stuff. It's like you've got, assassinations via subterfuge and infiltration. And this program emerges during that North Node and Gemini transit. And then in the 80s, we can come back and talk about this, but the 80s, it was the Reagan funding of the military industrial complex, Star Wars and all of those things were North Node and Gemini. The early aughts was the creation of Homeland Security and the torture stuff that came out with Abu Ghraib. That was all the same North Node transit. And then we're living through one that just ended. And I was thinking that it would be related to, it wasn't so much in America, but it was like the idea that we have domestic counterterror operations.
Yeah, well, it was domestic terror because it was that there was like a law that was passed that like everyone is now a domestic terrorist if you like pretty much raise your voice on anything.
Yeah, and I know there was legislation. It sounds like it passed, but I know there was some that also didn't pass. But what was in that bill was exactly this: the architecture for anti-terror the security state architecture. Let's just put it that way. And that did return. It was a big deal during the last 2.5 years or 18 months with the North Node and Gemini. But in other countries, it was huge. I mean, you saw like Canada with some of this is something called, and this is a tactic, it's real, people can look it up, where the government will send in their own agents to infiltrate anti-government groups. So you saw it in the 60s around the same time, but with the COINTELPRO operations, where they would send, like in those student groups, you would have an FBI agent, or you would have FBI agents embedded in what appeared to be resistance movements as a way to control, monitor, or even create and kind of use it politically.
I mean, we saw that too with like not only the BLM protest, which had all like the staged cop cars and bricks and everything, but you also saw that with January 6th. You have Ray Epps, the only guy who's not getting charged for anything, and he's the only guy that's being like, we should totally go into the building and knock everything down.
Yeah, Ray Epps. I just learned about Ray Epps and just did a little bit of
Really?
research on that. Well,
Oh,
I don't. I deliberately didn't follow the January 6th stuff because I just feel like it's so much of
it's a
a
horse and
political
pony show.
theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't like. For me, it's like Wall Street, Pentagon. That's what is where the real action is. Military and finance. But that just felt like, and it's so hot. Like as soon as I would even try to even talk about it, it's like it's a trigger. It's one of those trigger things that is in our culture right now.
Are
Where
you denying that there was an insurrection that happened on January? Just kidding.
for me, just, and I wish I could study it and speak strongly about it, but from what I've seen, it appears that if I had to bet, and I don't know, I think there is some kind of like that. I saw videos where those there were locked. The Capitol is locked. How did those doors get open? I mean, I just can't. Let me put it this way, without even going into the details. How could this be possible in like the greatest military in the world?
No,
I
no.
mean,
I used to work concerts, and if we like, there would be like bullets flying, and security would stop something like that. That would, and there's videos of the cops letting people in and talking to people, and the fact that they call it an insurrection, but it was not like no one's being even charged for that. But I mean, anyway, we're kind of getting off topic with this, but
tours of
go ahead.
just to say the tours of the Capitol, like that field, like there's videos where it's these kind of pliant, oh, look at this, taking pictures and stuff. I mean, that just doesn't feel as insurrection-y as what you might otherwise think of with that term. I just want to say one thing. This is highly related to Mars and Gemini. And Mars was in Gemini 6 weeks after January 6th. But Mars and Gemini is all about information and the information wars and like how we frame information. What information do we trust? How is it being used as a weapon? And so it's not just this one example, but it relates to the air signs in general. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because to understand any of the air signs, we have to think Mercury, Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the Mars retrograde's filtering through is the triplicity lord. Oh, let me just break this down quickly. All air signs, just think about if we use only rulers that comprise the whole sign, right? What rulers are they? It's exaltation lords, domicile lords, and then triplicity lords. Term lords are a subsection, decan lords are a subsection. So you can understand any sign by just examining the nature of those planets that rule, or any element by examining the nature of those planets. The air element is unique because it's only Jupiter, it's only Saturn, pardon me, and Mercury, and then you get Venus thrown in with Libra. But basically, we're talking about hardcore Saturn Mercury energies, and those are propaganda, right? It's the way that the trickery of Mercury that fuses with Saturn to control through information. Then you throw Mars in, and now you're getting wars over that. And so this is going to be part of this transit. I mean, especially in election cycle, people are going to talk about January 6th. What was it? They're going to throw it around. They're going to try to trigger people around what they believe it was. And
the whole FBI raid over Donald Trump's house was over documents.
Yeah, and that relates to J6 because it's all part of the same, what I would call creation of reality that happens when, and I don't mean this like, oh, it's false. I just mean all reality in some level is a creation through language and symbol and image.
Well, especially when it's curated media that is completely deliberately packaged in a way that it is taken, that is the way that it's taken in is for a reason. It's not, oh, hey, we just found this. It's all set up. Same thing with this YouTube channel. I do all this to create a vibe and a feeling. Same thing with media industries with billions of dollars behind the backs.
100%, and especially when there's political, you're talking about the body politic and controlling the mind of the body politic. I mean, and I would encourage people here, people think, oh, they sound crazy. Look, just put down J6 for a second, and even Trump, throw all that out, because that's designed to make these conversations a little bit more difficult.
Well, I actually had a buddy of mine, Ray Frusco. He actually has a podcast too. He sent me this text, this video of this guy being like, the internet's like no longer free. If you look up January 6th and you go on Google and it says 10,000 or 10 billion, images, he clicked on every single one. It's the same list of websites, Wikipedia, CNN, MSNBC, and it doesn't change at all. Like Google doesn't even have the information anymore. They're just literally, it's like, here is your, government spoon-fed information.
And so that's something that's huge that we have to talk about related to Mercury, but Saturn's role in air signs, because when we start talking about the birth of the new era that I was surmising we're coming into in that Mars retrograde video. I was calling it something like Pax Digitana or
Yeah,
Pax
Digicana, is that what you said? Or what was the other one?
Digitana or Digifitana. I couldn't quite. Digitana, I think, is the one I'm going to settle. I kind of settled on because like Pax Britannia, Pax Americana.
Well, so go over that just
Yeah.
really briefly. The what are the Paxes and how does the Mars retrograde symbolize those? What does that mean?
Okay, so when you have, we just break it down. When was the last time Mars stationed retrograde in the 26th degree of Gemini, as it will do this year? We point to the interim period after what's the name?
Augustus?
Octavian.
Oh, Octavian.
Octavian, before he had defeated his enemies in Rome. There was 3 of them. He killed, it was Mark Antony and another one. But there was a little interim period. It was about 2 years where the Senate, they were still figuring out exactly what would happen. There was all kinds of negotiations behind the scenes. They knew he had won the war, but it was like, what's going to happen next? This 2-year period was the last time we had Mars stationing retrograde in this degree. The outcome of this period is that you create the Roman Empire, and Octavian is given the title Augustus Caesar. And so all historians will say that's the beginning of the Roman Empire. It's when you have an emperor now. There wasn't 3 rulers or triumvirates. It was this godlike power, Augustus Caesar. The Mars retrograde happens in this transition zone, and that's also the period that marks something called Pax Romana, which was like a 200-year period of peace in that Roman Empire that resulted from the emperor emerging. And there was a whole succession of emperors that basically kept peace until 180 AD. So that's Pax Romana. Pax in 1818 was the date that Mars stationed direct last in the 9th degree. And that was when you have Pax Britannica. Historians will say that starts with the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo in, I think, 1815. So it's a little bit before, but it still was within the zone close enough that I'm just thinking, and especially with that British East India Company part of history that I was just sharing about earlier, that's when you start having the corporate control of that large swath of land and people in India, right time with this Mars retrograde. But that period kicks off Pax Britannica that ends when World War II starts, I think is when they.
And that was like the height of the British Empire.
Yeah, pardon me, World War One. So when World War One starts in Britain, basically, yeah, that was the height of the British Empire. They controlled the sea, they controlled like Africa, Asia. I mean, they just had a massive trade architecture that they were able to build, and basically people say relative peace until the world wars, and particularly World War One when it ends. And then after World War II, you get Pax Americana. And this, the last time Mars was fully retrograde, only in Gemini, so station retrograde, station direct in Gemini, is 1943. In that interim period, before you get the end of World War II and the whole new government system that we've grown up in. And so and people say that post World War II has been basically a period of peace. Pax means peace in Latin. And I was saying in that video, by the way, I'll say it here, you read the small print in history. Of course, there's wars happening during all these periods. Of course, there's horrible shit going down, people being oppressed and destroyed.
Same shit, different day.
Same shit, different day. But in terms of how we view these larger cycles historically, it's just uncanny that there's a match here. And and so what I was just saying is that we now are in a Mars retrograde 2022, 2023. If this is some kind of little 2-year interim period where what's going to emerge like in 2024, 2025, that we'll look back and say that was the birth of like either the new Roman Empire, the new British Empire, the new American Empire. And when I think about, just to come back to what you said, I mean, you can type into Google and it's not there. The information isn't there. So there is some kind of, what's descending is some sort of digital, how should we say it? I don't want to say dictatorship, but a digital kind of authority, let's put it that way, that's descending over the world. And that increasingly every month gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and we are more embedded into our phones, into everything that requires. So yeah, that was the best thing.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
please come in. Yeah.
What was so, and because I've been trying to talk about this, and it's not necessarily impossible, but people will dismiss anything that you say that's remotely, anything of just kind of looking for things as it is. But here in Denver, they want you to have your digital ID. They're like, don't use your ID, use it on your phone. And I mean, oh yeah, no, and this is like a big thing in Utah and Colorado and Arizona. These are all like tech states that are, that this dystopian shit's kind of going over. But it's really wild to me how, I look at this through a political view. We never, sure, you might vote through your dollars, but in this late stage capitalism stuff, that doesn't mean anything. I didn't vote for, the bailout of 2008. I didn't vote for hedge funds being able to, have all of this money and have all of this control of it. I didn't vote for BlackRock being able to own all this property or Bill Gates own all this property. But here they want you to have a digital ID and they want you to live your life underneath the, back, when it was just cash, you just use cash. You don't have to deal with anything else. It's you and the merchant. Now there's a third party for every transaction. That is some type of tech corporation. And the fact that now this is dealing with government stuff. So like your government ID, they just want you to have it on your phone. It's like, so now I think it's really classist, by the way, too. This is totally neglects, like people are like, oh, well, everyone has a smartphone nowadays. I'm like, yeah, that's all the people that, like there's still plenty of people in this world that can't afford to have a smartphone or don't have internet on their phone to where they could just do that kind of stuff and all that kind of nonsense. But we are being forced into, like, for example, the 5G towers here. I was like a big skeptic of 5G until I started learning, getting into it. The 5G radiation has more effect on my physical health than the fucking goddamn carbon in the air. Like that is legitimately like affecting my hormones, affecting the way I sleep. And I didn't vote for it. And these like little 5G towers, it has to come down more to earth and has to be more in your face. And the more I look at this, the more it's like, we are literally being ushered into a digital era in which we are going to be trapped on this system. Maybe trapped is a negative way of looking at it. Some people are going to say liberated in some senses, but like we are being forced to use a technical system that has no government authority over it. And it's the tech companies that really get to make all of the decisions. The governments don't know what 5G is. They don't fucking know any of that science stuff. They just say, give me the money. I'll say my talking points and you can build whatever infrastructure you want. And they just get it sold. And so that's what's so crazy to me right now is, maybe in those past few times, I mean, like when the West took over with Pax Americana after World War II, a lot of that was so, I don't know if that was a chosen thing. And right now, this doesn't feel like as of choice. This feels like so much like, oh, we're kind of getting fed into this both accidentally and purposely, but it's on accident on purpose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you raised so much there. Like, I mean, part of it is that, yeah, by the way, I've been a close enough to Wi-Fi routers, even my cell phone. Like I always have it on airplane and I don't ever talk like this because I can feel it on my brain. I mean, this isn't wild stuff. You can feel it if you put it next to your body, and there's all kinds of these.
No, but you're a conspiracy theorist for caring about your health.
I just don't want to have, I mean, I get a headache from it, but yeah, no.
Well, I was just talking to Cam Allen about this. and I was talking about this on one of my videos. I've got this new iPhone, the 13, because I bought it as like a content phone. It hurts my balls. I literally, when it's in my pocket, I'm like, why do my balls hurt right now? That's not a good sign. You know what I mean? But then I take it off and I have no problem, right?
Yeah, that's why I always put it in an airplane whenever I use it, and I very rarely will put it like this to talk on the phone. But the idea, these things are real. They affect our bodies. I mean, there's no denying it. You can just punch it up. Even the studies that will say, well, it doesn't harm you, though, they acknowledge, yeah, it increases. You can measure it. People can feel it. Yeah.
The bullshit that they say is that it's not ionizing radiation, but ionizing radiation is on a spectrum. It's not like, oh, it's just non-ionizing or ionizing. It's on a spectrum, and the 5G goes on more of a higher spectrum, more towards the radiation.
Well, yeah, and it's the relay requires a lot more of them and a lot closer proximity.
In proximity at a lower level, more people. Yeah, and it's one of those things that's has no studies behind it as far as safety, as far as why we even need it. 4G is fine, but it's to go back to what you were saying about this ushering in of an era. Like, I mean, something too that I want to get into is it's really interesting that this Mars retrograde is happening in between. We have the Saturn Pluto South Node conjunction, right? All the institutions crumble, all of the old way crumbles. We have this Jupiter Saturn conjunction that really ushers in the digital age in one sense, because that's when the vaccine passports came in, and that was like, hey, let's put it on your phone. And now what's interesting, what's the most captivating to me about this Mars retrograde after listening to your video was right after the Mars retrograde happens. So we already have this new 200-year cycle that we're in. Mars goes retrograde. After it's done with that, Pluto goes into Aquarius, where it really kicks off what's going to be the next 20 years. And Pluto continuing the narrative of Mars Saturn, which was lockdowns and COVID, and Jupiter Saturn, which was the vaccine. Pluto continuing is not the runner-up I want to be facing afterwards. Like a Venus, well, and it's also too, I don't know if you saw this, but in 2024, Pluto ingresses with the sun. It's a sun-Pluto cazimi. And then right after, there's a Mars-Pluto conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius. And it just seems to be that degree right there, continuing all of this ushering in of stuff. So I find it really interesting to say that you were like, oh yeah, we're going to be ushering a new era. And that's coming up in March of 2023. And in between that, we have this Mars retrograde that in previous times has literally been like, yes, this was the time of going over paperwork, going back and forth. You mentioned that D-Day was planned around this Mars retrograde in Gemini that was going on in the 1940s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 125%. And I just want to say, I mean, yeah, this is a major point. We've entered into, even non-astrologers will tell you, there's something called the fourth turning, or other, like Ray Dalio. Ray, I think Dalio is his name. He's the economist.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that it's the end of the American empire and something else is being born. I mean, this is how you know that you're getting confirmation, is that it's coming at us from all different angles, that this is a birth of something amazing and new. And I want to just say here, the idea of Pluto being rebirth, I've kind of gone a little optimistic with that. And I want to make this point here, like, this technology is coming. We're all embedded in it. It's going to continue to deepen. How can we use it creatively? How can we use it to share truth? How can we use it and kind of jujitsu it so it's not harming us and it's helping us? This is our task. This is our great kind of task as human beings alive during this time. Like, this isn't about just resigning. It's about pushing back, maneuvering within to create a better world for everyone. That would include some of the stuff. I mean, we're talking now on this technology, like Zoom emerges right out of Saturn's ingress into Aquarius, March 2020. So there's huge upsides here that I think we should try to spend time thinking about. At the same time, though, yeah, part of capturing those upsides is having shields and swords to get rid of the bad stuff. And we know that there are, just quickly to go back to like the history of this technology, just look up DARPA. It's developed out of the defense labs. You know, these are not technologies that are like, they're designed with a military style control structures in mind. And this is what I was saying earlier, when you think about the highway systems, the technologies that were chosen to be propagated were not for the benefit of the little guy. Okay. Nope. They're for the benefit of the oligarchs that control the American system. And those are the corporate Fortune 500. They're not going to let, they're going to try, they're working to make the most profitable system as possible for them. And we have to just work back, and then it'll be a dance, and then we'll have a compromise, right? That's the great war.
I think if we're lucky, if we have a compromise, because, you know, something I've talked a lot about on this channel is like, you are forced to have a car for no other reason but for the oil in the car industry in the 1950s. That's the only reason you need a car in America. Other than that, we could have totally created infrastructure where you can walk, have infrastructure that, you know, like had better public transit, more monorail essentially, or high speed rail. But that was all deliberately chosen for the benefit. Same thing with, I mean, you can go back to Pax Britannica. I mean, the literal corporate like government that took over a whole fucking country, a whole race of people. And then, I mean, I don't think it's hard to really, you know, get across what, you know, kind of dictatorship a lot of the Roman Empire was under for the good majority of its history. And so, you know, I had to talk with Gordon about this yesterday, as far as like, what's the positives here? And it was really funny talking about it. But, you know, and because I want to ask you this too, is the lot more I've been sitting, because I did that Pluto and Aquarius episode. Everyone's like, you need to talk about this more positively. And I was like, oh, it's going to be hard. But something that I really see with this Aquarius stuff is like, and the phrase I used with Gordon was like, if you want to unsubscribe from this stuff, it's like there's two options. You can be subscribed to the metaverse, get your microchip implanted. I was just at Chick-fil-A, and this woman that was working there, we were joking about, like, she put the iPad in my face. I was like, is my face getting scanned? She's like, no, but they have these microchips now that you can go to the Amazon fulfillment center and like just walk in. I was like, oh, so Amazon's already putting microchips in people here in America. I had no idea about that. And you know, there's going to be people that want to get onto that system. There's going to be people that are forced on that system. But I also believe that there is going to be more and more of a decentralized future here, and that this is going to be split into a two-tier kind of thing, and not necessarily one tier is better than the other. Well, on paper one would be, but this idea that there are going to be groups of people that go in more and more natural, that want to get this electronic stuff out of their life, that want to, again, unsubscribe from this kind of stuff and be there more for people. And I'm really starting to think that Pluto and Aquarius might be like, more and more of those people are going to start emerging and actually building these communities that so many people are so excited to talk about, but don't actually build in real life.
Yeah, and absolutely 100%. And they're here now. I mean, we've had, like you mentioned, these Aquarian activations we've already been living through, and activations on those exact degrees. So, I mean, what is around currently? Well, I think Twitter is a great example. I know it's full of censorship too, but there is a global community there that we can make connections with like-minded people. There's, if you go off the major corporate platforms, you have things like all kinds of communication networks to build like-minded connections. And so this is the upside. Absolutely. I'm just I think Pluto is a destroyer and a giver, and my studies with Pluto are quite optimistic. And I see this maybe even taking out and exposing some of these agendas.
Well,
There's
that actually, sorry to interrupt you, but that actually is something I want to talk about, because so in my like 2022 forecast, I talk about the Mars retrograde. We're just gonna be arguing about the COVID stuff, but there's a Mars Neptune square here, and that Mars Neptune square happens a couple times before it ingresses, and before Saturn ingresses, before Pluto ingresses. And my take on this, and I would love for you to dive more into this on your own, is I really think Mars and Gemini square Neptune is we're going to realize what was a lie. Where were we deceived specifically? And when that information becomes available, or at least accepted, is when there's going to be a turning in the conversation as to what the past few years were and what they were not. And going from the past 2 years, like me and Gordon talked about how it's all just been swept away. Like, oh, what lockdowns? We never did that. Or, it's all just kind of swept under the rug. But, what's really interesting about Pluto and Aquarius is like all the vaccine stuff. We're just getting started with, we have no idea what this is going to have in store for the future. And it just kind of seems like this moment where we're going to have these arguments about what the truth is, what the reality is. And I think that at a certain point, I was asking Gordon about this. I'd love your take on this too. But like, I look at Aquarius as the medical system, and is Pluto and Aquarius going to either, in Gordon White's book, Chaos Protocols, he talks about when Pluto went into Capricorn, not only did, the economy crash and this bubble popped, but we paid out the banks. We didn't get people, we didn't buy their houses. They had to foreclose. And I kind of see this as like, we're going to be very truthful about the medical industry, but we're going to give them more money rather than realizing the corruption that's there. And this, because I always had an opinion that this is going to usher in Medicare for all for this country, and not necessarily in the terms that people want it to be, but because there's going to be kind of a necessity behind it. But I'm kind of curious about your perspective of that.
Yeah, it's great. And it's a great question. It's an extremely important thing to even be discussing. I wanted to come back and just say that, okay, let me just start from the beginning. Before Saturn came into Aquarius, and right when COVID hit, so this was like January, February 2020, and you get this pandemic, the early phases, and then it becomes clear, right? There's a buildup, and it was like, okay, this is it. I had been waiting, by the way, because I had my pinned tweet for a long time. It was the nodes in Cancer, Capricorn have always brought these kind of major events: 9/11, JFK, AIDS, the drop of Nagasaki, Hiroshima. I mean, those are I was waiting. What's it going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes, and it's like, all right, this is it. And so it became pretty clear. There was an article in the MIT Technology Review, March 2020, where they just laid it all out. They were like, you're going to have to take basically health passports are coming. And it was like laid out kind of like you could hear an NPR voice, like, the health passports are going to be coming, this kind of soft. And it was like, you might have to be a little bit inconvenienced, but it's for the health of, and it was like, so I was like, boom, I started doing research right away on vaccines and the history of the vaccine debate in America. And once I tapped into Saturn and Aquarius being a huge marker for the debate around bodily autonomy, vaccines in particular, who gets to decide what goes into your body, it became clear that's the major war that Aquarius signifies. Because when Saturn comes to the sign it rules, Aquarius, it means that we have strong indicators of what the significations of Aquarius are. Saturn comes and lets those come out. So you just go back to Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the main case. Okay, this is I think it's 1909, 1908. Saturn is in Aquarius in those middle degrees. I'm going to check the date on that. This is the case where the Supreme Court says they can mandate the smallpox vaccine. And if you don't take it, you can pay the $5 fine. The government wins. This is 1905. Later, this is a case that is used to decide, where the court decides in the infamous case Buck v. Bell in the 1920s, that you can sterilize people with low IQs. They say Jacobson's the precedent that sets Jacobson sets the precedent that allows the government to basically sterilize you for the collective health. That's the danger here. I just wanted to, this is incidental, but when you start talking about the real dark Aquarian, where it's the authority of Saturn using medicine to decide for a healthy population, doing things that are unethical. And this is why you come to the 1930s. What happens then? Okay, we've got Tuskegee. So Tuskegee starts right when Saturn comes into Aquarius, again under the cover of medicine.
And what was that? Explain that real quick for people that may not have heard that before. What did they do?
It was the CDC, I believe, or the FDA.
So the CDC, okay.
It was definitely government researchers tricked men in Tuskegee, Alabama, I believe.
Specifically black men, right?
Yes, specifically black men. And so here we go. I'll just read it it's the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the inward male. That is the official name of the study. And it was a public health service, PHS, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. 400 African Americans, they deliberately injected them with syphilis to follow how they would change and morph related to a syphilis injection. And they told them it was something completely different.
So they injected black people with syphilis, didn't even tell them.
Didn't tell them.
Got it.
And to run an experiment. I mean, it was literally a study, aka
and this was the last time Saturn was in Aquarius. See, this is just, I love listening to this because I don't feel crazy, because it's like, wow, I wonder what could be going on now, and how maybe the ethics of science and experts and totalitarian, kind of parts and roles of the government can actually maybe do something that is beyond unethical.
Absolutely. And it relates to class, because a lot of the targets here they just trusted, right? And blind trust, didn't ask questions, didn't have attorneys to protect them or read the fine print or to say no. Like the idea of consent here and trust in authorities which is an Aquarius theme. So I'm still on this idea of just looking at the history of the transits. It's very, very clear. It's authority using medicine to control and experiment and take advantage of, right?
Well,
lie.
I don't know if I think I've mentioned this like 5 times now on my podcast, but I can't stop thinking about this so when the bison was eliminated here in North America to get rid of the Native Americans, to kill them all off, that was Saturn in Aquarius squaring Neptune in Taurus and Pluto in Taurus and the North Node in Taurus. So Saturn in Aquarius, and that's when all the bison were essentially killed in 1873.
Yeah, and it's that. So there you go. I mean, that's health related, the food, right, and then the Earth sign Taurus being brought into that. That's a really cool, just symbolically. Wow, those are beautiful animals. I love seeing those. They're like galloping on the plain. Let me just read this here. As incentive to participation in the study, the men were promised free medical care, and they were told, "We're going to take care of you." And while the men were provided both medical and mental care, they would otherwise have not received. They were deceived. And this is where Mercury comes in, right? Mercury is the great liar. It's the liar, And so it's the trickster liar of the Aquarian. And this is the dark Aquarian, okay? There's a whole light Aquarian, the positive side. And I'm bringing, and of course, medicine, there are breakthroughs in medicine, there's healers out there, there's medical technology that's useful and all of that. But you had to, it's the nature of this particular story of injections, government, CDC, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that when you come to the 60s Saturn in Aquarius, I forgot, there wasn't one that really jumped out, but the 80s Saturn in Aquarius, I forgot. But basically I did a whole research and a thread on this that I've forgotten some of it. But I was ready for these debates because they were trotting Jacobson case in mainstream media in March 2020. They were already saying Jacobson. Alan Dershowitz came out and was like, nope, you can tell people they have to take these shots, Jacobson. And so let's go research Jacobson. And it's not true. The lawyers will tell you there's all kinds of distinctions in the case. We don't have to get into the legalism, but the purpose here is that Aquarius is priming us to engage this. This is Aquarius. And when Pluto gets there, this is not going away. And this is why it's not only that you have a 20-year Jupiter-Saturn cycle that triggered in Aquarius. So we got at least 20 years of this conversation. But Pluto will be there for much of that 20 years. And from my money, I think this is the perfect conversation. I'm ready to take it head on. And it's just like with the ISAR debate that was just happening on Twitter. this is how we have to go about this stuff. When it emerges that there is like bodily autonomy issues or like discrimination around this medical stuff, you just have to calmly point it out, ask questions, talk about it, and there will be reasonable responses. Like there's little wars here. And just so for people that maybe weren't following that, I mean, it's basically ISAR. They did the right thing when they said we're either going to. My thing was test everybody or no one. That's what the science is saying. Treat people fairly. Like I can understand people are worried about COVID. Good. Like that's not something.
So test everyone or
Yeah.
or don't, you know, or don't test anybody. It's either one of the two. Don't just test the people who aren't vaccinated, even though it's a year in and we know that that doesn't do anything.
Exactly. So, or especially with the new variants, right? Even the up and coming, official science, right? How Aquarian is that, by the way? Official
Oh
science.
my God.
Even with that, it's like they know that there's variants and that they evade the protection. And so if you're really concerned, test everyone or no one. They stood up and did the right thing. I'm so happy, man. It makes me.
I'm very happy that they did switch to it. However, I guess and this is just, it's hard to not, because I was really talking to Gordon about this and really being kind of cathartic about it, but like something that as like I guess as a young person, it's hard to not forget that, like, well, it was a little bit different too, because on their website they're like, we're going to change and update our policy right along with the CDC the minute it happens. Pretty much said that, and then a week goes by after the CDC changes their guidelines and there's not a peep from ISAR days before it's going to start. It's kind of like, hey, I thought, are you going to hold yourself to your word here or are you not? And that's what it was more upsetting, that we had to bring it up in such a kind of like call out fashion in order for it to be changed. And I think I'm very glad that they did change that. However, it is, I look at that as this, I don't want to call it information war, but it is hard to navigate, how to have these conversations when it is something that, because there's something I was talking about Gordon, like this is continuing. This isn't the past, although it is projected as if it is the past right now.
It's continuing because the astrology tells us it's going to continue.
Exactly.
Put simply, we don't need, look at 2020, Taurus, conjunction Jupiter Saturn. What lasts for exactly 20 years?
You mean
and
2000?
Then now yeah, so starting in 2000 to 2020, what is the major narrative that triggers, that stays around and then now is basically gone? War on terror, right? Mm-hmm. And it lasts the whole time. You have continuing iterations of the war on terror. Different enemies are trotted out, and that's a whole 20-year cycle. Boom, and it goes away. And then now we're in what the philosopher, I have to get his name up, but this is a Italian philosopher, Julian Agamben, wrote in that same March 2020 moment. It was beautiful to see, like, it all emerged right there, right with Saturn's ingress into Aquarius, because Agamben publishes his article. He says we've entered into the biosecurity state. It's a permanent state of exception around biosecurity, and that's what's now emerged. And he lays it out. So I think that one way or the other, we're in the era of biosecurity for at least 20 years. And so that we need to, like, my thing is, like, we have to at least just be able to talk about it calmly. Like, I love these people. Like, I try to love everyone. I mean, I've got tons of Libra. My model is to, like, be inclusive. Like, okay, you have a different opinion. Great. I don't care. Like, I love you anyway. Okay. You need to feel safe. This is what you need. Cool. Let's try to accommodate you. Like,
I completely agree. I try to be on that same page too. I guess it's also, I don't, well, I do too, because again, like, I've had people on this podcast that we're probably not going to agree on everything politically, which is fine. But like, if you're a great astrologer, you're a cool astrologer, like, I still want to be your friend. It's different though when you are, enforcing rules that are discriminating me and forcing me outside of a social situation based off zero evidence, based off zero science, based off zero fact, all based off discrimination, especially when it's medical, when we're supposed to be like a very inclusive, like, non-ableist community.
For sure. And I mean, the devil's in the details, and there's going to be, like, difficult disagreements. I just want, like, my sadness for me over the last 5-6 years, really when Saturn, I'm trying to trace, like, the rise of Trumpism. It's really after 2012, honestly. I think that this stuff starts emerging. It's like the second Obama administration in America, really the rise of social media, frankly. There was a real marker with 2012. I think 2012 happened. People, I think that the Mayan calendar ended, and there was a big change that happened in 2012. I felt it strongly, which is basically the takeover of the reality with this thing getting embedded into the nervous system.
It was Neptune going into Pisces.
It was, yeah, Neptune in Pisces, Uranus into Aries.
Aries, yeah.
That was the rebirth of kind of some like a new cycle with Uranus. But basically, we're in a whole new reality where these things are, because it's, even if it's not going to be injectables, it already is embedded with the nervous system just through the eyes and the scroll and the touching. Like it's responding to our nervous system, and that's like
It's a
one
good
way to
point.
look at this whole thing. But it's going to go deeper and deeper into the nervous system. The key is to be able to turn it off. I've always said, like, do yoga and meditation. When I do meditation, the phones aren't on. Okay, I'm not looking at a screen. That's the style I practice. So I want to keep that going. I want to keep any tasks that we can do, whether it's non-digital, those are going to become increasingly important, because the digital is going to invade. They make profit. It's like, this is where you can have, I look for bridge building. Okay. And my politics are like, I'm all over the place. Some lefts, I
Yeah.
come up with some leftist tradition, but I'd be probably accused of being right because I'm against some of the stuff that's happening. But like, with, you go back to Amazon putting chips on their workers, we can unite with the labor movement. We should be uniting with the labor movement. This is why, I pro-labor, completely pro-labor. And the other theme of Saturn and Aquarius and the Aquarian is the labor movement. You can just punch it up, Saturn and Aquarius in the 30s. It's the most protests for the labor movement in history because of the changes that were happening economically during the Depression. And that's the other big downside of Pax Digicana. It's like, it's peaceful, but everybody has a chip telling them as soon as they wake up that they're on the clock and that you can't take a piss. I just saw someone on Twitter saying Whole Foods said I couldn't take a piss and I had to wait for my break, and they're like holding it in. That's where this is going, where it like emerges with the biology, but not for your benefit,
No.
potentially for
Why
the
would it
extraction of
benefit
profit.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it might if you're like art or exploration, or I can see maybe ways if you want to go into the body, it's like a new frontier of creativity or something. But the corporate, we can't, when the corporations and the power structure is in control of the technology, they are probably going to try to extract profit.
Yeah,
And this is where
the
you
people
can,
aren't controlled. There's no people board to like make sure that these big tech companies are doing things in the interest of like people and humans. They're doing it for the interest of how can they take a couple $1 billion into a couple $100 trillion. My kind of philosophy is I really think they want to do the transhumanism stuff. They want to, make you a part robot, so then they can just own your body and they can keep selling you body parts. And eventually, I mean, that's going to be the next $1 trillion business, is humans becoming robots. And it's so funny. I remember when I first got into astrology and I read an article about Pluto and Aquarius being about like when like robot babies are born. And I was like, that's conspiracy theory. Now I'm here. I'm like, holy shit, we're on the way. We're almost there.
absolutely. And so I just to trace it back, what is it? So this is the Aquarian that when Pluto ingresses, so we just come back to like the question, what about Pluto in Aquarius? Even this Mars triggering Neptune, like what is this about? And I think that it's exciting, but the big risk is that we have to check power, right? This phrase, telling truth to power, calling power out. And this is not one political party or another that has an ownership over this.
Yeah, it has nothing to do
It's
with political parties. It has everything to do with money.
it's a human thing, right? This is like
Mm-hmm.
Occupy. You go down to Occupy. I kind of wish I was there. I remember it clearly. It was all sides holding hands saying, look, the banks have taken over. Let's resist this group that has an inordinate power and it's dispossessed large chunks of people. Let's unite together. And then, of course, that gets just dispersed right around 2020, right? It's the emergence of the kind of embedded, this thing gets more embedded to trigger the emotional responses. That's why I didn't want to look at J6 a lot, because I know you can't even talk about that. There's no way to
No,
even go there.
I mean,
It just triggers this stuff.
I
Yeah.
mentioned it on my weekly a couple of times, and you would have thought I said that everyone should, go and kill babies and like rape people or something. Like people like literally lost it as if it was like they were there or that they were affected in some way. And it is really like overwhelming, where it's like, when you get these kind of like how connected we are to this digital age and how much in the nervous system it's baked into, and how things that like literally, if this was 20 years ago, no one would really give a shit about that. I mean, that would be maybe a completely different story, but the emotional response people have to that moment that they didn't even experience, that they didn't even really see, that they don't even really know anything about, it really tells to the power that this digital world has.
120%. And like, for me, and this is, if you go back to my video, I brought in this idea from the World Economic Forum. There is this guy, Naval Harari, and he's like this professor from Jerusalem, I think University of Jerusalem, a historian and philosopher, best-selling book *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*. And he is a World Economic Forum kind of rock star who speaks there and is always giving ideas to the World Economic Forum. But I put in that video, I referenced him specifically because I want people to go research what he's saying and what he's been saying. And in the little quote I put in my video was he's saying he's warned that what's emergent is going to be dictatorships of data.
Yeah.
So that he who has the data is king. He who owns the algorithms and the AI and has the advanced versions of that come from all the data that's been generated in the last 10 years, those are the new masters of the realm. And this is why it doesn't even matter who is got the little title of president.
No.
You think that, I mean, you know, it's like there's a whole control architecture that's 10 years, 20, 30 years advanced. And I've always said this, there's a Princeton study comes out in 2014, America's an oligarchy. These are Princeton sociologists and economists, I believe. They just said, look, it's an oligarchy, wake up. And this is what George Carlin, this is why I love Carlin. He's like, you know, you have owners, wake up. They own you. They own the best land. They own the politicians, the judges, and they just go through it all. And that isn't to dismiss some of the issues that are important for people. Like I don't offer that.
But the problem is that, you know, and this is what's really hard to get to people is that this idea that it's Republican versus Democrat is the psyop. That's what they want you to think, because then they can just divide you and not realize that both sides lose in this game. They're not only taking over, like, for example, the farmers, like you have John Deere being like, no, we're going to lock our technology for our tractors. So you stupid little farmers have to pay us big money and to get our equipment out there. And then it's also happening on the liberal side too. I mean, so many people just signed up for like, you know, did you get the iPhone notice? Oh, you might not have an iPhone, but the iPhone, but you got a notification during COVID. It was like, do you want us to let you know when you've been around someone that had COVID or whatever? And I was like, what? And again, and you know, I really like you said, like it's whoever owns the data is the king, because that's Saturn and Aquarius. Like we are talking about authorities, and the more data, the more information you have, the more of an authority you become. You're seeing that be true on social media and influencers. Like these are people that are experts that have the information, and once they become the source, they become the expert on it. They become the authority on it. And so if you just put that to scale and you apply that on a government level, on a corporation level, you can really see. And this is why it's so. You know, personally, I get so upset talking about this because it's you know, you bring this stuff up and then people are like, oh, well, you're just, you know, a conspiracy theorist, QAnon, you know, extremist right winger Trump person. And, you know, they give you all your labels that they have, when in reality, it's like, if you can't even have a nuanced approach on this situation, because the tech companies don't give a fuck if you're Democrat or Republican, because there's going to be one party here soon. It's the tech party where they own everything, they control everything. And there is, you know, the government's just this banana republic, which is pretty much going on right now. But it's really crazy how quickly I'm noticing the tech corporations stepping over the government. Like, I mean, the government's so behind on this technology and what it means or what it does. They're still talking about Roe v. Wade and guns. Like it's the fucking like past 100 years. Like we're still debating this stuff, and we're not even talking about the technology that is. I mean, for example, like, you know, I've talked about Alison McDowell on this channel. I've referenced some of her videos, but she's talking about how they're making games for children in children's schools where these tech companies harvest the data of little children playing games, and then they engineer these games to create social circumstances for these kids to make social judgment calls, and that affects their actual real life relationships. So then they take this data, they get the kids to hate each other, and then that gets the kid to be away from the parent. They want to separate the parent from the kid, just like they did in black families in the 60s, in the 70s. They want to separate the kid from the parent, get the kid to be on like the, you know, the government control. But we're literally going after kids in so many ways, but also like their data, and we're having them monitored on screens as if this is, you know, totally fine, as if we have research and studies that show like this has no effect on their development or their social skills. But now we're actually going out of our way to manipulate these people. And it's just like, it's almost insane to watch how much the tech companies have just, I mean, they're 100 steps ahead of the government. They're so far. I mean, it's going to take another 2 decades until we actually get this kind of in a working order. And by that time, you know, I feel like the tech companies are going to be so beyond where we're at now.
Absolutely. It's happened so fast. It's been so revolutionary in terms of the change to the consciousness of the citizenry. I'm talking about social media and the rise of the phones. it's almost like you can't even know what hit you. It's just, it's happened so fast that we don't even know how we've been changed. It's like the frog boiling in the water. I remember when I was, and I want to bring this back to the astrology, the Mars retrograde transit
Yeah.
here in a second, but I remember pre-2020, I'd avoided getting one of these fuckers for a long time because every time I got one, I was like, I was writing a lot back then. I would come home from work and just write, and I like have some novel drafts and I have tons of poetry. This is what I used to like want to do, and I still love writing. But and when anytime I got one of these, I wouldn't even produce. I wouldn't produce shit because I would be home scrolling through this fucking thing.
I've wasted so much of my life on my phone. I am getting to a point in my life where I deeply regret how much time I've spent wasted on my phone and scrolling.
Exactly. And so like even the consciousness of reading a book and the patience it requires to allow the words on the page to slowly change, but then the benefit that you get from that, like the imagination is triggered when you engage a text because it's slow and you then can visualize characters, and that is all gone. Now it's just direct hits of dopamine,
Except for Jen Zart. I just got done. She's got this whole big old library. She's got like a 10,000 book library in Olympia that we were just talking about. And I was like, I thought it was crazy that she said that, because I'm like, it's so rare to see someone doing 2 presses and have a library and a magazine in the age of 2022 where everything's tech.
Yeah,
But
no,
yes.
for sure. I mean, but just like in thinking about how we spend our time, like, I mean, I could be, I'll be in a book of millions of books and I'll just be on my phone 95% of the time, scrolling Twitter, it's changed, it's programmed how we perceive information, how we interact with information. And I mean, it's radically changed. You can't understate how radical the change has been. I'm just looking at my own life, but look around, everybody's on their phone, everybody's always walking. I mean, it's just omnipresent. And so it's going to take us a while and there's going to be stages of processing this. And this is what I think the Mars retrograde will be good for. Because remember, 7 months in a sign, you're talking about something called saturation or oversaturation. One of my keywords is burnout. And how are we going to burn out from social media and from the information? This whole retrograde, the real opportunity is like reconfiguring and reformulating, like figuring out how we're going to, another chance to like reorient ourselves to these major changes that are not stopping, but this is a good time to like reorient. And this could look like, I don't know, like I was just closing some accounts. I'm trying to get streamlined.
Yeah,
So I only have like a couple accounts that I have to manage and nothing else I even have to think about. And then making sure all that is backed up and protected and 2-factor and all of that. So it's manageable. One of my problems with this is it gets like 20, 30 counts. I mean, it's like, I can't do it. To talk about losing everything. And so I've had to,
Yeah, sorry. I talk about monkey brain a lot, because something that I find is like when I use technology and it gets extremely frustrating, it's like the DNA from my monkey ancestors gets unlocked, and it makes me want to rage. And so I'm on the same path of like, I'm thinking, I just re-downloaded Twitter and I hate it. Like I'm thinking about just getting rid of it. There's no necessity for it, but like concentrating what I do. I just talked about this with Jen's art because a kind of a crisis I'm going through right now. Maybe a crisis is an extreme word, but like all of my career, I've been doing this my whole life. This has been like the only thing I've really done, is all digitized. I don't have any of it backed up. All of my horoscopes, they're all expired content anyway, but I don't have any of that backed up onto anything. Like if YouTube deleted me, I'm fucking gone. And that is, terrifying to think of when it comes down to, like, for example, I mean, Jen's always talking about this with books. Like, there's no, like, we're not going to be making books of Twitter threads or all the conversations that happen on Twitter over the years that were, very deep. Are not going to be there forever. And it's so I'm also in this. I mean, like, the reason I really liked your video too is you're just talking about like replanning things, reorganizing yourself. And that's where I really feel like I'm taking advantage of this Mars retrograde. I'm actually really curious about a little bit more like what your plans are to do with this Mars retrograde in Gemini. Because for me, like, it's concentrate on my content. Like this is my 4th podcast in 24 hours, trying to streamline it more, be better at it. But I'm also been working on an album for like fucking 2 years now. And it takes a long time, but how do I, for example, I have Mars and Gemini. I get so distracted with online things. I'm this Gen Z. I was pretty much buttered for this kind of stuff. And how do I eliminate those distractions, like Mars and Gemini squaring Neptune and Pisces, like not being so distracted with it? And how do I like, focus and like something I talked about too is a lot about this Mars retrograde is about focusing, like not being too lost in all of the plans that you can do. But I'm really curious about how you're personally going about this transition.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about backups, because I'll just do it here. Rumble and Odyssey, it's a quick little thing. It'll back up your whole channel and automatically back up every time you post. And all you do is have to set it up with both of those. So my channel is backed up immediately to those two more
I
censorship resistant
I tried to do
platforms.
Odyssey and it didn't work for me, so I'll have to have your help with that because mine didn't work.
Cool, and we can figure it out. I'll just show you and see what it. But they have a good responsive, hopefully, team or something. But yeah, that's what I'm doing for that front, is to, at least if YouTube somehow goes away, and this might not. I keep my stuff really. I don't want to like dive into heavy controversy, more because people. I just want to share love and share good ideas and share astrology that can be applicable. Like this conversation we're having now, is anybody, no matter what they believe about the reality or the world, can benefit from thinking about using this Mars retrograde to like trim social media and trim their internet engagement. This is the kind of stuff I like to focus on. And then I have Pluto pilled with you and Dan, where we can maybe be more controversial if we need to be. But what I'm doing, yeah, I mean, I just backed up everything. I'm just like getting organized with like where I can find the passwords that are I'm updating all of that so that it's like basically impenetrable, like 20 characters of all the different kinds, so no one could ever come into my accounts. It would take like years and years and years. But I can easily get into it with two-factor and with these special passwords. So that's been a big part of it. I feel tons of energy with Mars and Gemini. It's in my ninth house. It's total energy time. I'm like tweeting like just tons of stuff. I don't even know why. I just wake up and just tweet just for it's fun for me. But
Twitter is so fun, especially just shooting off a tweet first thing in the morning and getting off and coming back to the chaos later.
Yeah, just tweeting and like being part. I love social media. I love being part of the astrology community. That's the thing. I love our community. I love that we have a network of people with a common modality of the world, that look at the world in the same way. I love supporting astrologers. I'm totally against. This is my main trigger, when astrologers like attack others, and like I want to defend the attacked astrologer. That's kind of where my Mars comes in. I want to, especially if it's around technique. It's like, so what? Like this person's using the 12-letter alphabet. Give them a fucking break, man. That's his fucking technique. I'm gonna tell you this here, because this is a good place to do it. But I've always wanted to come out with a video that cusps are real. And my main thing is that it's fucking real. I can show you the books in the 20th century. This was a technique that smart astrologers were publishing about, this technique, and we're using it. Now, is it the best technique? No, in my opinion. Do I practice? No. But I wish we would stop attacking each other over differences of technique. Who cares that it's an innovation in the 20th century? But it's a real fucking technique. Like evolutionary people, I don't know about cusp. They use the 12-letter alphabet. Anyhow, this is one of my pet peeves. Like, and I just want to come back. I want to protect astrologers, support astrologers, and I love social media for that. So I'm trying to use my Mars as just like
I used to be really bad about like, and this is maybe just me being, young in this work, because I started doing this professionally at 20, 21 or something like that. And I used to, bash and hate on people doing other techniques that I didn't, personally use. Like I still laugh at degree theory, but I've also come to the realization that like it's really not about like, as long as you're baking a cake, it doesn't really matter what steps that you're really taking. And maybe that's not an appropriate analogy, but I would much rather have people explore these options and do these type of things and go with it. But yeah, then when it does get into the like, oh, this technique here, fuck you for doing that. It gets a little like pointless. Like, and that is something that I know is baked into the community, but also baked in the human condition. Cause I try to be aware of when I do that, and I try not to do it, even though I do. And that's where I think it gets hard, especially when you're like really involved in a practice that you really care about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like there's some of that's going on where I'm just trying to be involved in the community during this time, and like but it relates to the political discussion we were having earlier too, because like it's the same thing. I feel like, think about it if it was the reverse. Like if I was like, and this was happening with ISAR. I don't mean to come back to this, but I want to come back to it just for a second here. Like, think about if ISAR was like, we're not doing shit, and they were completely on the side of like, I guess I don't think this is MAGA, but what is perceived as so-called MAGA or whatever. And then we had a bunch of our colleagues that were like, hey, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I need this to feel safe. I wouldn't want them to be just like laughed at. Like, okay, you get a seat at the table, express what you need to feel, and we'll try to accommodate. to make you feel protected. Like, this is what the process I would fight for too, even if I agreed with the other model. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's process over result, which in my view is the key. And this is why, like, you have fairness, you know, some people, you know, these liberal values, I'm talking about the liberal tradition where you have, you know, like 16th, 17th century, the idea that people deserve to be treated fairly.
Yeah,
That
like
we can,
actual liberal values, not whatever this is now.
these are the upsides of these liberal values, where you have a process over result. We're not interested, the result comes from making sure the process is done properly. And so part of my process, so I'm focused on, but just to come back to your question, my main thing right now is just kind of getting a smaller footprint and getting more efficient. That's a Mars and Gemini, like, so that my days as a creator and as an astrologer and a consulting astrologer, I mean, it's a lot of fucking work. People don't,
Yes.
our
People
days are,
This has been, I did a 12-hour day yesterday. I got this today. Plus, I've got to go in and edit all of it. I got to go in and make the reels for it. Plus, I'm doing consulting work. I'm doing 2 to 3 clients a day. Plus my weekly. Then plus I got to get back to emails. Plus it's, you know, people don't, something that I also really respect out of astrologers that do video is there is a level of hustle that no other astrologer, like that other people don't have to deal with. Because when you're doing YouTube, you have to learn the media, you have to learn the branding, you have to learn the SEO, you have to learn the tech. And it's a completely different world, and it's a completely different way of life in order to go about this way of being an astrologer. But I also think this is the most fun way of being an astrologer. Is like I get to have great conversations and talk to people all day long about astrology for a living, and I'm so blessed to be able to share this information in such a great way. And I get excited to do this work. And that's what I mean. I'm a Mars and Venus and Gemini. Like I used to just get like when I was first doing this work, and it took me a lot longer to do my videos and all my processes and everything, but I loved it. I love the hustle. I love the engagement. I love social media. Like I really love Twitter. I was really big on Twitter for that reason. But I also have realized that it's like, you know, this is a excellent time for me to get really down to the nitty gritty of what I do. And I've realized how much time I spent scrolling, how much time I've spent wasted on things that aren't actually applying to my purpose here in my future. And I just talked to Gordon about this. I would love your take on this. Over the past 2 years, like I kind of just ended up here in astrology. This was not my plan. I just somehow got here. I don't want to say just somehow, but I got here. This wasn't a part of the original plan. And I never felt like this was like a part of my, I mean, I always felt slightly like this was a part of my purpose, but over this past 2 years and seeing how this work has really affected people's lives and actually come in and be a catalyst for change, unlike anything else, I feel like I have to do this work and I have to get better because this is a part of my purpose. And in fact, this is a part more of a lot of other people's purposes if they just accepted that role. And I'm really curious if you've been kind of feeling that same way too with your work. And is that why you're going even harder?
well, for me, absolutely. I mean, when I was triggered into the astrology world, the bug bit me. Jen's art was my initiatrix. That's how I say it. And boom.
Initiatrix.
Yeah, this comes from like some of the tarot books talk about the high priestess as the initiatrix. It's a keyword for it. And like I was like, so when I met her, I went back home. I was like, damn, she's like this. She initiated me into the astrology world. But yeah, I mean, for me, it became pretty quickly, this is my life purpose. This is my life path and purpose. There's a reason why all this stuff started happening fast. And so I embraced that. I mean, this is my identity. This is who I am at a fundamental level. Now, there's other layers of that always, and who knows what the future holds, but this is not just some kind of game or joke. I mean, this is like whatever unseen forces are extant, whatever is happening in these unseen realms, my physical manifestation is astrology, and this is what I need to be doing. And I completely feel that. And so it keeps me going. I mean, that's why I want to be available to clients. That's why I do readings, is that I want to be with people, and the magic that happens in the astrology reading, it's a very powerful and profound thing. And I want to share my videos because I want to get these ideas out. I mean, there's something, we're all interconnected, right? And there's something we're all building and creating together, this new world, right? This new world. And we have an effect. Everyone can have an effect. Even one little tweet. Sometimes you see like some account, 100 followers, and they tweet something and it goes global viral and changes reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, I'm in, and I'm completely committed, and not by choice either. It wasn't like I woke up and said, I want to be that. There was a lot of things in my life in the past where it's like, I want to be that, but it wasn't right. It wasn't my path. This became my path. And just to say another thing that I'm doing, I am going to be shifting over to a Substack where I
Oh,
do
really?
plan on writing all of this stuff down that's my major pivot that's going to be happening. I don't think it'll be ready probably until Mars, probably when Mars is in
Yeah.
Gemini, but direct later. But I plan to, get the written word and the written form, and coming back to that, because I was talking to my friend Alina recently about this. Like, astrology in the textual form is really, when you look at the history of our tradition, that's been that through line. It's the text that we can somehow combine and present, like a text that then lives in its own form. And we've seen it even with our colleagues, like Chris's book, Hellenistic Astrology, those
Well,
ideas are going to have
I mean, me and Jen Zar were talking about this. This is one of the very few things you can do in this lifetime, that is going to be read and studied. And like, if you write an astrology book, there's a good chance someone will read it in 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years, maybe even more than that. Because we're reading books thousands and thousands and thousands of years old that are quotes from even longer ago. And this is something that, I mean, really bakes into like when you're writing this stuff, it's not just for your audience today. This is for generations and millennia to come. And I think there is something insanely powerful with being able to be the translator of that knowledge.
Absolutely, man. 120%. And it's like the commitment that, like, you wake up. I mean, you sounds like this happened to you. It's like all of a sudden I wake up and I'm a fucking astrologer. I mean, what the fuck happened? How did I end up here? First of all. Second of all, I love it. It's just my path. I feel so inspired. And so what am I going to do with the fact that that has happened to me? Okay. How am I going to respond to that event happening? Am I just going to like shut my computer and go, drink beers? I'm clean and sober, so I don't do drink at all. Or am I going to, like, what would be the next response? Like in a fight, what's the combination that you respond with when you were responding to how reality, this reality is a fight. I guess that would be the metaphor. That's my Mars and Aries. But the response would be, okay, yes, I say yes. And I want to take it up a notch. How can the ideas that I have, how can I make sure that they're added to the stream for others, whoever's going to get them wherever? And last thing I'll just say, I think the video side is really important, because see, you're on video and your voice and your image, this stuff, you may be alive in 4,000 years doing your image and likeness and voice. And
I might have some deep fakes of all my voices, and I just get continued forever.
You'll be a legend, just getting on video, talking on that. We're on YouTube like this, and there's so much of us out there. And it's not even about like the ego of being a legend, but it's just that there's some kind of continuity of that. That's a whole nother thing where, having verbal exchanges also might be what is necessary to continue on. I really believe spiritually, we all continue on anyway in some other spiritual realm, or there's some kind of Akashic record where this is already there, but yes, the text is extremely important. So that's part of my Mars and Gemini, is just getting back so I can get my content production as that there's a textual production, and so that it can be collected and published and because I have tons of stuff we haven't even talked about, like how I do natal readings and all the ways that
all of my content is just horoscopes for the most part. I don't even, which I'm trying to switch my content over to evergreen, because I mean, just like what you said, it's been really recently where I've been like, okay, I'm an astrologer, and there's been a part of me that has, been into it for various reasons, versus now I'm kind of accepting that this is what I do. And if this is what I do, I want to do everything as great as possible. I want to do everything to my fullest extent as possible. And what does that look like? And versus like, it was kind of like, oh, I'm just kind of doing this. I'm doing YouTube videos. Yeah, I'm seeing clients. I'm, friends with people in the community and stuff, versus now it's like, this is a life path. And, rather than just kind of walking this life path, looking backwards in the past, almost, how can I redirect myself and look to the future of like, if this is the path that I'm walking, what road am I paving here? Is it, is this like a shitty dirt road, or is this like a beautiful golden road? And I'm on the same page as in terms of just really thinking about, like, I mean, I have a book in the works. I have so many fucking things in the works, but I also think too that now there needs to be a pairing of the media and the text stuff. I mean, that's what I thought was so important about what Jen's doing, but also too, I think, people like you and me having voices online and being able to get this information out there, I think is the way that we get people into the deep, richer text. Like, rather than just being like, oh, here's your horoscope. I know I'm guilty of just doing nothing but horoscopes, and I'm working on doing more things, but rather than just the horoscopes, how can we actually talk about the meat, like the meat and bones of the subject? How can we really get into the technical stuff? And this is why I wanted to do this conversation with you and just my podcast in general. It's like usually it's a single show, but when I have people on, that just makes the people more valuable. But like I'm not trying to sit here and be like, oh, let's have a very, you know, specific lectured style. But like the way that and I've said this before a few times in the past day, but like the way that I learn is like when I get to be around people that are, you know, superior than me in whatever field that I'm interested in. And if they're talking, I shut up and I listen to what they're saying. And I feel like having conversations with people about this stuff, about the deeper, richer techniques, about the more complicated things, even the stuff that's going to be controversial, which I've gotten to this point of there's nothing that I can even say that's going to be not controversial. I could tiptoe around all day long and I'm still going to get attacked. So I've just kind of been like, you know what, how about I actually just talk about everything instead and worry about the rest later. And I think that is something that is going to enrich, you know, people's study into this and enrich people's interest into this, because there's, you know, a whole subsection of us. And this is what's exciting about doing the podcast with you and Dan is we're getting to the juice of it. We're getting into the real, what it is. And I think when you can go into astrology in that direction, I think it makes it much, well, it's this, how we were talking about how astrology is so literal. Like if you're denying the literal, like how literal it can be, and you're kind of doing an astrology that's not literal, you're taking away its power that it has. And when you could be giving that power to it of being like, no, this is how it literally is manifesting. And we have the history to show it.
For sure. And that's why, like, I tweeted all this stuff about Jacobson and Tuskegee, by the way. I mean, I wasn't hiding this because it was too powerful. And like it, but I didn't present it. I just said, here, I just laid the facts. This is my favorite thing to do is like, okay, it's undeniable. Here's the dates. Here's what happened. Here's the theme. And look, and then look at the present moment. And if someone doesn't want to look at it, they don't have to, but at least it's the table has been set. And I felt like I discharged my duty. What is to share the information that I'm finding that I think is relevant for folks. And that's my duty as an astrologer. I feel like that I take on that duty, you know. And so even though that one didn't get a lot of traction, people I think avoided those topics back in 2020. They're like, this is a little too hot. At least they saw it. And I wasn't there were, and I wasn't even right. I don't want to write it in a kind of aggressive way. I just want to say, here's the facts, and you can look at it and make your own conclusions. Coming back to this idea just that you said here, I mean, you know, you are an astrologer, you're a prominent astrologer. There's a lot of people that, you know, aren't that. This has been your, like, there's a reason, this is how I think about it. There's the reason that the gods have placed you in this predicament, if you want to say that, or this set of circumstances. And so I think it's also good to just think of like, what do you want from me, astrology gods? Like, seriously, I'll say yes. Like, show me how to honor our craft, and with this life we've been given, like then the creative powers we have to produce. It's like making babies, right? It's like, oh, boom, and there's the baby, and that's going to have its own longevity. But you know, you've been chosen as a conduit for a reason, and you know, so I try to think about honoring the astrology gods, and like, and you see this in Valens and Firmicus, you know, they're all writing that, you know, these gods, you know, they're talking about the same thing. There's a reason why we've been kind of engaging in this. This is our life path, and we're still discovering it. It's not over till it's over, you know, and there's always the next article, the next book, the next idea. And I want to encourage people, like, there's still a lot of innovation happening. That's what I was saying at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, you can make astrology and make amazing innovative astrology that other astrologers in the future need to read.
Yes.
We're a link in the chain.
I've been telling, you know, like I've said this also a few times in the past few podcasts, of more people need to be doing this work, especially right now. But also, so many people are going about it by just kind of copying what other people see. And I think that's a great place to start. That's where, you know, really I started. But it's like, what you take astrology and your passion for it and apply that to whatever your gifts and talents and abilities are. Don't try to force something that you're not, but you are a special individual human. Like for me, for example, like, and this, you know, yes, I'm a Leo, so of course I can, you know, make myself sound good, but like, I'm really good at talking to people. I have the gift of gab. I don't shut the fuck up. I know how to make presentations and speak with a lot of that. So why not put that part of me out there? I'm not the best at the academic side of it. I'm not the best at, you know, the technical side of it. I'm not the best at, you know, like, for example, Jen Zart, she's like literally running a fucking library that's going to last for like thousands of years with this information, this data. That's only something Jen Zart can do. right? And and this is where it's like, the people that are listening to this and want to do more with astrology, it's like, take astrology but do your own thing with it, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's your own technique, whether it's doing products around it, or whatever the fuck it is. But there is something that if you're being called to this work, that you should be leaning into more, but you got to do it the way that you're supposed to be doing it, and you're only going to find out what that is as you walk that path.
Absolutely, 100,000% there on that. And it should be like, this point, in my view, is like, not only is it an invitation for people, but this should be like a pep talk or an encouragement, I think, for some people out there listening. Like, you have tremendous power. If someone is now been called to being an astrologer and they're learning these techniques, there's tremendous power that is latent there, that you can, it's going to grow in them. I tell people, they're like, when should I start readings, or how is this path going to look?
Now is good.
I just say, listen, it's gonna, like, you commit. It's more about, is there an alignment with, this is what you should be doing? Like, sit with that for a while. And as soon as those confirmations come, then just, it's like kick off from the shore. It's like you're in a boat, kick off into that shore, boom, and then just let it kind of emerge. Say yes, I guess is what I'm saying. I tell people on that point, actually, I will tell people, just get a one technique, make sure you got a technique or two that when people come to you, you're good with that technique and you can give someone something that helps them. Just make sure you have that first and practice with a few people. But once you have that, open for readings. You can open for meetings as soon as you have that one technique, So yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm glad that this conversation came to these topics, because this is where we start setting all the other stuff aside, and people can attack or not attack or whatever based on controversial stuff. But set all that aside. Think about astrology itself, and how can we be the best astrologers that we can be, but support the larger community and the craft, and like carry it through to those next generations. Because talk about the age of air. Look what happened last time with the the Pax Mongolica. Actually, that's another one. And I've talked about this in my Jupiter-Saturn conjunction video, Pax Mongolica. But that empire, the Silk Road, and it's literally the last Jupiter-Saturn air cycle. It starts right when it begins and it ends when it ends. And that created a whole trading empire, where these books were able to come from the Islamic world and flow into Europe, right? It was part of the transmission of the ideas. And when you talk about air signs, remember, we're dealing with Mercury, the planet of astrology. Saturn can have an astrological component too, but we're basically, our craft is like coming out and going to be flowing quite a bit, I think, in the next 100, 200 years. And any astrologers out there listening, I mean, just, join us. I mean, and it's a very welcoming community. That's another thing I will say, setting aside the disputes and some of the politics stuff in general. You want to be an astrologer, start a Twitter, and you're going to have people wanting to talk to you or engaging.
Exactly. Like, I think, and I have my own personal experiences with the community. Unfortunately, I've shared a lot, and I've probably put a bad taste in some people's mouth over it, which is probably not the most, the best thing on my side. But all I can do is really speak from my experience. But what I will say, and this is the thing I really hate about Twitter, is Twitter makes me hate people that are actually really good people. Like, because I'm seeing this reactive side to them and this controversial, engaging side to them. When you go to a conference, everyone is pretty fucking cool. Like, yes, I mean, in any group situation, you're going to find one or two assholes, but everyone is really cool. I mean, like, you're going to be embraced, talked about. And I think one of the coolest parts about the astrology community is we're all weirdos. There's not one normie. I mean, there's maybe a couple normies there, but like pretty much everyone's really weird. And that's what makes it so fun, in my opinion, is I get to sit down, and I know whoever I'm going to sit down to, I might have my judgment about them, about, the way that they look and how they think, but then you talk to them, and these are very complicated people. They're all very good people that, want to give to other people. It's this is my biggest issue with social media, is like social media and the way that the, societal, fear and censorship stuff is really coming about, is showing the worst sides of people. And I think, on Twitter, you could totally find so many people on Twitter, but I think really this is why I'm doing my astrology picnic that I'm doing, is like getting in person, like find those people in real life. There's NCGR meetups. There's I can't think of the other ones, but there's all types of meetups that you can go to, or start your fucking own if you want to, but find these people in real life. And again, this is why I want to do this picnic, is the connection. I think doing astrology with people is more profound and more impactful than just doing it by yourself. And it's such an isolating practice that like when you go and reach out and you go and connect with other people, it's going to completely enrich your understanding of not only astrology in your world, but like of yourself too, because these are going to be people that are going to be giving you insights into things that you would have never even thought about before, because it's their perspective and their take on a complicated system that you're also aware of.
100%. And this is going back to the Mars and Gemini themes with this long retrograde. It's perfect. Mars is action. Okay. And so there's going to be some good time to review our actions in the topic of astrology, because that's Gemini, Mercury ruling Gemini. Gemini has a large signature of just astrology itself, can be a Gemini theme. And so I think it's a great time to think about how we're acting in the astrology community, what things maybe we need to go back over. But by the time January comes, and I got some thunder here, and Mars stations direct, and Mars is now moving forward, it's a great time to like get started with our actions in the community or reignite our participation in the larger astrology world. This is a perfect way to to engage just the things you're suggesting there. This long Mars transit, review, rework, and then bust out in January with like a new Twitter if someone's going to do that, or a new Substack like I may try to do if I can get it done, or whatever it's going to be. It's a great way to engage with astrology right now during this Mars retrograde cycle, and you have the trine from Saturn supporting it the whole time.
I'm really liking, so I don't necessarily like the Mars and Gemini squaring Neptune, where everyone's just going to be fighting about information that's just probably wrong anyway. Mars is trining Saturn, where at least the conversation is being had and it's being understood. Like that's very supportive for, I think, this air stuff of like, how do we actually have these conversations and these debates, really is what it is, in a way that's actually, because like what I loved about the Mars retrograde in Aries squaring Saturn in Capricorn was like the day of like the first presidential debate, and it was just nowhere. I mean, it was just two old people yelling at each other, not even having the same conversation. And Mars square Saturn was so, it was astrology good for that reason of like, this is perfect, but this is the same way as astrology good, but in the light of like, this is going to be, and this is why I'm trying to do all these podcasts with people right now, is like, this is going to be the time when these conversations are heard and applied, and they're not just going to go whisked away because it's not something that, because it's not that, la, 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 I'm not listening. This is like, a healthy way of going about it. And it's going to take a couple months. It's going to take a process of relearning, but as especially, I'm really excited for January, because like this whole time, in my opinion, like what I'm doing is just kind of getting in a new groove, and then really kind of, I've been telling people this is a great time to start something that is a trial period, and then perfect that sequence until we get to January. And then that's when you go end of January specifically, not the beginning of January, the end of January, but and then that's when you're going to be able to apply the information, because a lot of Mars and Gemini is just like, you got to learn it. Like in order to learn it, you got to do it. And then once you kind of learn from your mistakes, go over it again, and then you start again, you're going to be able to fly with it.
Yeah. And I my favorite is planning. It's just like, that's an action actually, to like go research, like for example, like Odyssey, just to come back to that one example, like there may be like some forums, or like that's all Mars action, but it's not like go time. It's like the review and the using the action, putting the effort and energy into review, right?
It's funny you say that, because I'm in a third house year, Aquarius ruled. Saturn is in the fifth house on K2. I have Mars in Gemini, and what I'm working on right now is actually getting off Patreon and doing it all on my own website, and and going into emails and not having to worry about social media, and just doing the emails, because I think that is the safest route as far as the digital space goes, because I'm too scared to now be on Patreon. And also too, eventually when YouTube probably kicks me off when Pluto hits my sun, I gotta have some type of backup.
Well, and that is why Substack I'm going to. I just started my Substack, and I don't even have anything on it, but I'm just like was tweaking it to get it set up, and like I'm already getting people on. I'm building a mailing list now. It's just emails that generates a huge emailing list. So later I can always just go only to email if I need to, as a way to communicate with people. I still like being on the social platforms. I'm someone who but it's a question to where they like us,
Yeah, exactly.
And I try to keep my stuff pretty tame, but even astrology as a topic, no matter if you're talking about controversial applications, they might at some point just say astrology's off, or one, or two, and you can't be a small creator. Like they want you to sign up for the digital system, and that like
that's another terrifying thing I'm afraid of, is like now I'm like signed up for the metaverse. Now I got to keep up with it at some point.
And so there's like, it may just be that we like with PayPal is a big one I've been thinking about. It's like, when are they going to pull? If they pull, for me, it's like close. Shit.
That's, I mean, I survive off PayPal. I use Stripe but realistically, I really don't know how I would be able to pay my bills if PayPal, I'd figure something out, but it would be pretty devastating to say the least.
Yes, I mean, we'd have to figure another payment processor, but it's the work side of it. Because like for me, it's so integrated in with these other
With
services. Like
Patreon, with like my Patreons with PayPal, I have readings from PayPal, so that's literally how, like, the medium of which I get my income. And if that's why I'm also trying to get rid of Patreon too, is I'm trying to get, well, I have to start accepting Bitcoin now too, just so I have a way to make money if that's ever an option, or if that's ever a situation I find myself in. So that's actually a whole nother thing I'm getting into. But
I got some Bitcoin for some readings recently. It's been good, my first one. So I'm learning how to do particularly something called the Lightning Network, which is how you make payments on the Bitcoin network. Lightning is going to be the future.
Lightning.
And so that it's called the Lightning Network, and it's what they use in Costa Rica, El Salvador, for example, where it's, and a lot of wallets support the Lightning Network, but I was able to generate an invoice sending someone a Lightning invoice, and then they paid on the Lightning Network. But this is the thing with exactly the kind of things that are topical for Mars and Gemini. Rework, action around money. Remember, Mercury is money. Mercury is the trade of things, in the realm of trade. And so to be prepared for these alternative scenarios, planning the future of our online businesses, if that's what people are involved in, rework, plan, and then launch. Yeah, it's the second half of January, but February's got some awesome stuff. And even into March, there's some really cool astrology with like Venus is exalted, Jupiter will be in Aries, Mars will be direct, Mercury's direct, Venus is in Pisces. There's like awesome energy for cardinal signs, and which remember, Mars rules that Aries. So there's like some elections where you can get Venus and Aries with Jupiter, double benefic Aries.
Yeah, the Venus Jupiter Chiron conjunction. And I mean, I'm looking forward to Jupiter Rahu. That's all I'm looking forward to. Like, get Jupiter and Taurus already.
Yeah. I can't wait. Next year's, but that's just 2023 is so much better. Just
it's so much better, dude. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. March is going to be really wild, but when you talk about Jupiter going through Aries, landing into Taurus, conjoining Rahu, you talk about the Venus retrograde in Leo. The last Venus retrograde in Leo was one of my favorite things ever of my life. Like, it was such a fun summer. Added that on top of Saturn not being in its domicile sign. Sure, Saturn and Pisces is going to be weird, but there's so much to actually look forward to with 2023. That's not pretty much 2019 through 2022.
Exactly. I mean, you don't have Saturn square the fucking nodes.
Yeah,
you're not going to have eclipses square Saturn.
And Jupiter and Saturn will start to sextile. So there's actually some supportive stuff here.
Sextile. And we're going to be talking about it. Come to Pluto Pilled. We're going to have a whole year ahead, probably, or at least a quarter ahead. But this is the thing I've been telling everybody: just hang on. Like, don't even try to do shit. Like, just rest, plan, and chill, and like work on stress reduction is another thing I would say with Mars retrograde in Gemini, because those are two stressful energies. It's like fiery Mars and Gemini's going crazy, the monkey mind stuff. Like, we're going to de-stress as a major theme of just rest to brave this. These eclipses are fucked up. I'm just going to say it right now. They're really triggering.
These next two eclipses?
These next two.
Yeah, they're there. The more I look at, I knew that Mercury Cazimi total lunar eclipse was, but then I've been looking more at that eclipse on Venus. I'm like, wow, that one's also looking pretty fucking bad.
Pretty horrific, man. And it's not a Cazimi with an eclipse sun. Count me out.
There's two Cazimis. There's the Venus Cazimi and the Mercury Cazimi both being on eclipses, which is like, that's going to be pretty hard.
But the first one, I mean, it's like you're in the heart of a sun that's corrupted. I'm sorry, with that Venus, like with the sun there. I mean, now the second one, at least the sun isn't being eclipsed. It's like the moon that's being eclipsed, but just still, I'm like, I basically get through this stuff. Let's get through it. And we haven't even talked about the mundane, like the crisis economically, the election, the war in Ukraine's ramping up. Those guys are about to do an offensive now. I just read it here. They're talking about it. Britain came out and said Ukraine's getting ready to counteroffensive Russia. You think that's going to go well?
No, not at all. Well, that's exactly why Obama was like, no, we shouldn't give weapons to Ukraine, because that's going to gaslight them into thinking they could win a war with Russia. So all this is a ploy to get America and NATO involved. That's all this is. Like, there's no logical. That would be like if Hawaii decided to start a war against America for their own separation. Like, it's like there'd be ways to go about that, but not through a war sense, because you're not going to win.
It's just going to escalate, and like more death. And then you see the energy stuff. I just talked to some Austrians here. They're traveling. And that's the cool thing about where I live. There's always backpackers and stuff. And hey, I was like, before we go, hey, tell me about energy. Are you afraid? Are people talking about this energy thing? And they were like, well, they're younger kids, so they were like,
What
oh,
do you
we're
mean
not afraid.
energy? Like spiritual energy or like
No,
frequencies and shit?
the energy prices have gone
Oh
parabolic
yeah, yeah.
in Europe right now. It is crazy, and people are having to basically shut down their businesses because they can't afford the energy bill. In Britain, pubs are having to close. It's
But it's
like
all for
10
It's all for
times.
the Ukrainians. It's all for them.
And that's what I'm saying, is that as that escalates now, is that
People
going
well, the price of
to
war is actually going to get real for people who like this. I was just talking to Gordon about this. My generation and a lot of other generations have never actually experienced war. Like the Iraq war was something completely off to the Middle East. We never had to deal with any consequences from that. Sure, there was 9/11, but that's a different story. But like, yeah, when you can't pay your bills because there's a war going on and the government wants you to think that you should actually be supporting this war, and actually we're going to be taking your money, your rights, your time, your resources for this war, people might actually go, huh, wow, maybe this is kind of bullshit.
Yeah. And it's going to be an opportunity for labor to unite with, I don't even call it like whatever the label from the other side. I just fight, but no labels. Mars and
Yeah.
Gemini, let's destroy our labels, because the labels actually
I
serve to
hate the.
divide.
I said a whole rant about this the other day. I think on my. I did a podcast, a pretty actually controversial podcast called the Aquarian Divide, and it's. I was remember like this. These labels are what is like what it is. Like you can't just throw a label onto everything, and that's what it is. Like that's not actually helping the conversation at all.
Let's unite in our similarities and in the things we can unite around, which is like poor people deserve to have food. Okay. Business owners, and I'm talking about the energy and the economic costs here. And I think there'll be some kind of new, I'm hoping, Occupy movement where we can have like the fairness and the way that the wealth is distributed in the society is going to become an even more important theme with Pluto now coming into Aquarius, and that'll be a part of it. But this war, these next few months, like, just to come back to that the point I was trying to make, like people are going to have to buckle up and hang on. Like we're not in Kansas anymore. To use that Matrix line, we've left Kansas, and this is accelerating fast and escalating fast. And I mean, day by day, I'm very concerned about it. So, but yeah, get through this, because it'll be a resolution. And I think next year, when we're done with whatever this little moment of climax is, there will be another phase that's a little bit, I think, easier to manage, because at least we'll know, like, whether it's a hot war with NATO and like there's a draft and now we're in a whole new thing. At least it's maybe we'll be, and then the Fed will turn on, they're going to rescue everybody, then that'll be good, for at least,
They're
for
going to
people to
come
have
rescue you with your
stocks.
digital money.
Yeah.
And then the IRS
money
will come rescue you from not paying your taxes with guns.
from your digital money. Yeah. So this whole thing is like, it's just get ready for more of these birth pangs. That's how I see fall. And
That's a good
then
point. That's a great way to put
it's
it.
like the birth pangs. And so, yeah, I mean, what else would I say about just that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just here, man. I'm riding it out, and I'm glad that we have, community. I'm glad we have, like, literally you. I have you, Dan,
Dude,
anybody
you
else
and Dana,
really.
it's because, dude, it's been really hard being so like, I have these views and these opinions on astrology that are very, very clear, but I'm, villainized for seeing it this way, and being able to actually talk to other astrologers that see it this way. It's like, God, I'm not crazy. I'm not the crazy person here. And it's been so awesome having you and Dan around just to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's part of, like, Mars and I think Gemini is finding this whole theme of astrology. I'm thinking about, because it's my ninth house, so it's like very much astrology for me, but also Mercury, the mercurial component, that we can kind of act within the astrology world. And I'm looking forward to just doing more of that for this 7 months. It's going to be frenetic. There will be, by the time it's over, I think we'll be thinking, God, this has been a long time.
Because then Mars goes into Cancer, and it's like, we just need to stop.
Yeah.
Too much
Mars in
arguing.
Cancer. Yeah, give me that Mars in Cancer. Yeah.
How do you want to wrap this up? Do you guys? I feel like we've talked about everything I wanted to go over.
Yeah.
Unless you have any other comments or final thoughts.
No comments, except just, love each other, and like try to accept and love the people that are that seem to be different. It's just what I want to say. Oh, and I wanted to say this. I do think that I've seen improvements around that, even with all of the bifurcation of reality that happened in 2020 and 2021. I think people are, and this Mars and Gemini will be a part of it, that we're going to have a chance to go over again the duality, the labels, the kind of psyops, or the kind of just the ways we were viewing reality before. That now this is a time to like review and maybe come to some new ways. And I've seen it within the community. There's less division somewhat. I think this election will be a pocket of challenge around it, but I
Yeah.
see people like, even with this ISAR thing, it's like, okay,
They
yeah,
love,
it
yeah,
was, we had to raise it, but then there was a really kind email that Sam Reynolds sent and it was received. The ideas were expressed. I think we're going to come back down to earth a little bit and come back down to like the brotherhood side of in Gemini,
I like
Mercury,
that. Yeah.
especially with Saturn and Pisces. It's going to it's going to wash away. Dane Rudyard says the waters of Pisces destroy the structures that Saturn established in Aquarius. That it's the destructive side of Aquarius. It's going to really kind of pare back the worst of what we've just gone through. And so I'm looking for connection, brotherhood, sisterhood, personhood, humanhood of all kinds. And that's really what I want to bring in out of this whole period of like, we can love each other even more. Like we survived it, right? We're
Yeah.
not
Well,
in camps,
that's something that I keep thinking more about is like I hated hearing it in the grocery store of the we're all in this together, but like we're still all in this together no matter really, I don't want to say no matter what, but as of this moment, there's not like, oh, like we're over it. Like, no, we're still in this moment, still experiencing this thing, and we still have to get through it together, even though tensions are, I do agree, kind of starting to go down, but they were very high a minute ago. But
Absolutely. And even like with, and just the one thing I just quickly, and I will go ahead, just like with Obama and Biden and these people, it's like they'll do some good stuff, like that Iran thing. I was happy to see a de-escalation. I want to see, so like I'm willing, and I want everybody to be willing, like your
well, there was a
political.
de-escalation in 2014. From what I understand right now, the nuclear deal's out, and it doesn't sound good
Yeah,
from what I'm understanding, which is
there's a return, but I'm willing to like have my worst enemy do something good and like give him credit, I guess is the
yeah,
point. And I'm not even saying that, like, I don't even know who I just try to forget politicians, all of them on all sides. That's my personal take. But
I like that take.
like if a politician comes in and is like signs a bill and it like going to help us and it help the the lower classes and improve our lives, I'm ready to cheerlead it, man. I'm
Yeah.
ready to cheerlead it. And that's part of my just attitudinally how we can, I don't know, just be with each other, because we're going to need to check our reactive warfare side during this Mars in Gemini, because that we could be triggered. So yeah, it's a longer conversation. Those are just some final thoughts from me. So,
Well, anyway, do you want to plug yourself? Twitter, Substack, whatever.
yeah, just at SJ Anderson 144. That's how you find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Just type in SJ Anderson, the numbers 144. I'll come right up. My website, sjanderson144.com. And that'll be just, it's always going to, there'll be some changes, but basically I'm there. I'm ready. I do consultation. I love it. You can sign up for readings there on that site. You can message me and DM me. I've reopened those, by the way. All my DMs are open on every platform. I'm just available to chat with. I might not give you a lot of response because I'm really busy, but I will. If there's questions, just write me, message me, email me. And thank you for listening. Have a wonderful time out there. Thank you for having me, Cam. It's been great to be with you. And yeah, I'm excited about your new podcast style set of episodes here. It's going to be really cool to listen to some of those.
Yeah, thank you again. Well, thank you so much for being on here, and I'll go stop recording.